Messieurs, passionnés d'agilité, bonjour et bienvenue à cette 13e édition de l'Agile Tour de Québec. Le thème de l'agilité, on le connaît, mais encore cette année, on doit dire qu'on l'utilise plus que jamais parce que nous aussi, comme bien des entreprises, depuis le début de la pandémie, on a dû s'adapter à cause d'un mot qui commence par C, finit par Ovid. Voilà ce qui explique la tenue de notre événement en virtuel encore aujourd'hui. Chaque année, Agile Tour de Québec s'inscrit dans une série d'activités organisées toute l'année. Il n'était pas question pour le comité organisateur de ne pas vous donner rendez-vous cet automne, même dans les circonstances actuelles. Donc, l'organisation et les membres de la direction sont très fiers de pouvoir vous accueillir pour cette deuxième édition virtuelle qui s'est avérée bien populaire car l'événement est présenté encore cette année à guichet fermé. On est combien présentement en ligne? On est plus de 1400 personnes. Hey, je vais vous entendre faire du bruit! Merci. Définitivement, notre famille de passionnés d'agilité s'agrandit année après année. Je me présente, je m'appelle Carl Labrie, animateur chez Éclosion Animation Professionnelle. Et je suis très, très heureux de vous retrouver pour une troisième expérience à l'animation de votre événement Agile Tour. Mentionnons que l'événement d'aujourd'hui est une superbe occasion pour chacun de vous de parfaire vos connaissances, de partager avec les membres de la communauté, d'élargir vos réseaux de contacts. Et tout ça, ça s'inscrit naturellement dans le désir pour la communauté agile de Québec de faire connaître, promouvoir, partager les expériences dans le domaine de l'agilité. Et pour atteindre nos objectifs, voici le programme que l'on vous propose aujourd'hui. Vous l'avez peut-être découvert sur le site web dans l'agenda qui est à même la plateforme Swapcard. En ouverture, place à nos conférenciers principaux en direct de Londres et du Portugal. On aura Gabrielle Benefield, Tao Baker, Riccardo Mariti, qui prendront la parole dans un instant. Par la suite, ce sera le début des premières conférences et ateliers. Sachez que malheureusement, pour les ateliers, les inscriptions sont terminées. Le lunch aura lieu de midi à 13h. Vous pourrez donc profiter d'une pause, mais pas tellement longue, puisque je vous convie à être des nôtres à 12h30 pour un quiz interactif dont le gagnant va mériter un prix de 100 $ à la SAC. Donc, pour participer, vous allez devoir utiliser deux appareils, c'est-à-dire soit un ordinateur ou un téléphone, une tablette ou un téléphone. Il sera très important, prenez en note tout de suite, d'inscrire votre véritable nom pour participer au quiz, histoire de mieux vous identifier plus rapidement si vous êtes notre gagnant aujourd'hui. Nous aurons aussi un tirage de participation dans le cadre de notre concours Instagram. On vous donnera plus de détails dans quelques minutes. Cet après-midi, notre invité du deuxième keynote sera Mme Colleen Johnson. Et par la suite, vous pourrez assister à diverses conférences avant la fin de notre événement qui est prévu à 17h. Maintenant, question de vous orienter dans cet univers virtuel. Laissez-moi vous expliquer comment accéder au contenu de la journée. Il vous suffit de cliquer sur l'onglet « Programmation » et choisir la conférence à laquelle vous souhaitez participer. La plateforme vous permet également de discuter avec les autres participants et aussi les conférenciers. N'est-ce pas merveilleux? Si jamais vous arrivez à un pépin technique ou encore si vous voulez poser des questions spécifiques, on vous invite à appeler ou texter Andrea Roy-Lecourt, dont les coordonnées sont affichées ici sur l'écran. Il y a des responsables qui sont ici toute la journée en direct pour vous aider si vous avez un problème. Pour vous souhaiter la bienvenue officielle à cette magnifique journée, qui est de mieux que le sympathique président d'Agile Québec, et je vous présente M. Éric Hamel.
Bonjour à tous et à toutes et encore bienvenue à cette 13e édition de l'Agile Tour de Québec. Comme on le peut se rencontrer en présentiel encore cette année, la belle équipe de bénévoles a été à votre écoute et on vous réserve plusieurs nouveautés, comme Carl l'a déjà dit. L'Agile Tour de Québec permet aux membres de la communauté de partager leurs expertises et leurs expériences. C'est le plus grand planning de la communauté, vous donne accès à une multitude de conférences et d'ateliers, mais la communauté Agile de Québec est active pendant toute l'année et il existe plusieurs autres activités qui pourraient vous intéresser. Si on prend les conférences mensuelles sur différents sujets, 6 communautés de pratique ont été mises en place dans la dernière année, donc Kanban, DevOps, Safe, Agile Clinique, Coaching et Facilitation Agile, ainsi qu'Agile RH. Le calendrier complet est disponible sur notre site Web. Bien sûr, tout cela ne serait possible sans l'implication d'une merveilleuse équipe de bénévoles et de généreux partenaires. Je tiens à les remercier sincèrement. Je ne vous garderai pas plus longtemps. Vous avez une journée bien remplie. Je souhaite une excellente journée et j'espère avoir la chance d'échanger sur la plateforme avec vous durant la journée. Merci beaucoup.
Cette journée est possible, encore une fois, grâce au soutien de précieux partenaires financiers. Pour nous les présenter, je vous propose d'accueillir le responsable du comité organisateur de votre Agile Tour Québec 2021, M. Nicolas Boudreau.
Riccardo. Bonjour à tous. Merci d'être présents aujourd'hui avec nous pour cette 13e édition de l'Agile Tour, mais surtout de nous suivre dans cette aventure virtuelle qui a débuté l'année passée. Je ne pense pas avoir rappelé à quiconque ce qui s'est produit l'année passée, mais je peux vous garantir que l'équipe de bénévoles avait travaillé très fort pour changer de cap et offrir une nouvelle formule en ligne. Cette année, toujours en ligne, nous avons mis tout autant d'efforts et nous avons voulu offrir une expérience complètement réinventée et évidemment améliorée par rapport à l'année dernière. Ainsi, vous remarquerez sans doute l'utilisation de la plateforme technologique Swapcard que vous utilisez présentement et qui nous permet d'innover cette année et qui nous permettra tous ensemble de vivre une expérience beaucoup plus dynamique et interactive. D'ailleurs, j'aimerais mentionner que nous sommes à un record de participation cette année. Avec cette 13e édition, nous sommes tout près de 1500 participants qui seront présents avec nous aujourd'hui. J'aimerais prendre également le temps de remercier énormément tous nos précieux partenaires qui, eux aussi, nous font confiance pour cette journée. Nous avons donc au total 18 partenaires. Donc, merci à CGI, partenaire fou d'agilité. Merci à GFT, partenaire fou d'agilité. Merci à Cofomo, partenaire fou d'agilité. Merci à Humanix, partenaire fou d'agilité. Merci à Nexap, partenaire fou d'agilité. Merci également à tous nos partenaires enthousiasme, Systematics, Nexio, Logisphère, Edify Technologies, Neatro, Praxis, Kanban Québec, Nmedia, Livio et Pixis. Et nous avons également 3 partenaires collaborateurs, GEM Événements, Culture Inc. et Project Management Institute ou le PMI. Évidemment, l'Agile Tour ne serait rien sans l'équipe de bénévoles qui ont bâti de toutes pièces la journée. Je vous présente donc toute l'équipe qui seront également parmi vous toute la journée dans chacune des conférences. Nous avons donc Éric Hamel que vous venez d'entendre il y a quelques minutes, Kevin Cameron-Gagné, Sabine Pouillon, Shérif Bena, Sonia Le Chasseur, Youssef Benamor, David Chevalier, Anna Hernandez, Lisiane Stott, Fernanda Rigolo, Luis Fernando et moi-même, Nicolas Boudreau. Donc, un peu comme Carl disait, j'aurais tendance à vous demander une bonne main d'applaudissements, mais je vais me garder une petite gêne. Par contre, je me croise évidemment les doigts pour tous vous revoir l'année prochaine et même, pourquoi pas, prendre une petite bière dans notre 5 à 7 habituel des 11 premières éditions. Sur ce, je vous souhaite une excellente journée à tous. Profitez-en et amusez-vous. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Nicolas. Oui, les chances de se revoir en présentiel se rapprochent plus qu'ils s'éloignent. On est d'accord? Ça va nous faire du bien. Cette année, nous sommes vraiment fiers de vous offrir un épisode spécial du podcast Culture Incorporée en collaboration avec Praxis, Nmedia et Nexap. Ce podcast bien connu auprès des gestionnaires et des entrepreneurs explore les différentes facettes qui définissent et impactent la culture en entreprise. L'épisode spécial pour l'Agile Tour Québec porte sur le thème suivant. Après plus de 18 mois de pandémie et de télétravail, comment la culture d'entreprise a évolué et changé? Qu'est-ce qui s'est transformé au niveau interaction et culture des entreprises au Québec après un confinement et une manière de travailler différente? Cet épisode explorera les apprentissages et observations de plusieurs gestionnaires qui ont vécu au front cette transformation culturelle. Pour les certifiés PMI, vous allez trouver sur le site de la programmation une identification du code PDU dans la description de certaines conférences et ateliers. En cliquant sur chacune des conférences ou ateliers, vous découvrirez un code PDU avec les lettres soit S, L ou T. S pour stratégique, L pour leadership, T pour technique. Si vous ne trouvez pas de lettres, c'est qu'il n'y a pas de PDU d'attribuer. Les certifiés du PMI pourront ainsi faire un choix judicieux des conférences en lien avec leur certification et leurs besoins. Pour connaître vos PDU, les certifiés du PMI et participants de l'Agile Tour doivent transmettre un courriel avec les noms des conférences ayant des PDU auxquelles ils ont assisté. Les coordonnées de la personne à joindre sont sur la page partenaire PMI. Cette année, nous voulons récompenser plus que jamais nos passionnés d'agilité. Donc, il y aura 3 prix chez Best Buy qui seront décernés aux 3 utilisateurs les plus en feu, les plus actifs dans cette journée. 100 $ pour le plus actif, 50 pour le deuxième, 25 pour le troisième. Les prix seront dévoilés sur les médias sociaux après l'événement. Encore cette année, nous vous invitons à nous partager une photo sur Instagram de votre outil, article de télétravail fétiche, favori, avec le code #ATQ2021. De plus, identifiez toujours @Agile Québec. Quand je dis article fétiche, c'est que je veux voir vos articles qui ont révolutionné votre expérience de télétravail. Est-ce que c'est un whiteboard maison? Est-ce que ce sont des écouteurs techno que vous perdez dans vos oreilles tellement ils sont petits? Est-ce que c'est un cahier électronique? Est-ce que ça, c'est des pantoufles chauffantes ou encore un panda que vous avez adopté pendant la pandémie? En tout cas, vous comprenez, parmi tous les gens qui nous ont envoyé leurs photos avant midi aujourd'hui, 2 prix de participation d'une valeur de 100 chacun seront tirés sur le coup de 13 heures. On compte sur vous, donc go à vos téléphones. Parlant de médias sociaux, voici comment nous suivre aujourd'hui. Via Twitter, @Agile Québec, sur Facebook, Agile Espace Québec, Instagram, Agile Québec en un seul mot, sur LinkedIn, communauté Agile Québec, et dans chacun des cas, vous inscrivez le hashtag ATQ2021. Ce qui nous amène enfin à la présentation de la conférence d'ouverture qui a pour thème Innovation in the Wild. À noter qu'il sera possible d'échanger avec les conférenciers directement par chat via la plateforme Swapcard. En direct de Londres et du Portugal pour cette conférence qui se déroulera en anglais, je vous présente avec beaucoup de plaisir Gabrielle Benefield, Tao Baker et Riccardo Mariti. À vous la parole et bonne conférence.
So, if you can hear me, my video says the host won't let it happen.
Good morning. Good morning. There you are. Fantastic.
There I am. Good morning, everybody. I am actually in London. I do live in Portugal, but I've been zipping back and forth a little bit. So really excited to be here with my fabulous co-conspirators, Tao Baker and Riccardo Mariti. So we're going to jump in. I'm going to share my screen and take you through a few stories, as long as the host enables screen sharing. Let's give that a minute. So yes, let's see if that's working now. Oh, host out there, please enable screen sharing. Okay, meanwhile.
While we're waiting, Gabrielle, I was just thinking about sort of, what so often we're looking at sort of doing root cause analysis on our failures, but working with you, we've been trying to do root cause analysis on our successes, and I think that's been such a great sort of turning, trying to find out what we're doing. Let me know when your screen starts sharing. Is there anyone out there on the? But
Isn't that the fun part of a Zoom meeting? There's always that moment, like this morning, I was rushing to get on. We were so incredibly early, and then my camera didn't work. Nothing actually worked.
Well, you know what? We're meant to be an agile team, so
exactly.
I'm sure we can adapt.
I actually found in the early days when I used to give training, and you of course rely on slides and things. And I think one of the best times was when it completely failed. So I had to wing the whole class. And I have to say it was probably one of my better classes at the time. So that was the pivot towards doing more.
I'm very happy to just start a little bit if you want, just because I've got a few things lined up.
Sure, go for it. Yeah, I don't know why. Hang on, screen sharing's actually screen sharing's working. Let me go to screen sharing.
Perfect.
We're good to go. Thanks, team. We got there. All right, let me know. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yeah.
Great. All right. We're going to talk about really innovation in the wild, but we're going to talk about strategic innovation. That seems to be one of the key things I'm running across. People really need to innovate. So we're going to be telling a few stories in our practical real world examples. So I love, there's a great quote. It comes from President Kennedy. He was in Cape Town in 1966. And he gave a speech where he said, "We live in interesting times." And he said, it's actually a Chinese curse, whether it is or not. He said, it's a time of sort of a lot of fear. There's a lot of fearful things in the world that we don't understand. And there's also a lot of opportunity. It's one of the most incredible times in history, a lot of innovation happening. And I feel like that's us right now. And I heard that, I thought, wow, 1966 or 2021, it's much the same thing. So if we think about the things that are disrupting us, not only the pandemic, I'm actually in London, as I mentioned, and this morning I went to the supermarket, and because of all the supply chain disruption, combination of the pandemic and Brexit, so political as well, the supermarket's getting really emptied out. I felt like I've gone back to, these stories of the 1970s. It's hard to find things already. There's a lot of social pressure. I work with companies where sustainability was sort of a nice to have, let's save the planet and feel good, but actually it's now critical, because if you do things in a non-sustainable way, people stop buying your products. So a lot of these very interesting disruptions are happening. I'm a bit of a futurist, so when I look at the incredible tech out there, let's take a fairly boring industry. When I work with insurance companies, I loved one of the innovations was when you have people buying your policies, let's say a home policy, not only do you want to not have to make these big payouts, but be quite proactive. So they were actually using drones to fly over houses and let them know when they needed to replace their roofs and to actually connect them up with suppliers. So things like that, seem quite simple, but they actually help their businesses do a lot better. 3D printing, we're not quite there, but the idea that soon we'll be able to print major organs for the body and replace them. We're seeing this convergence of technology and opportunity. So this rapid change is disrupting large companies. Nothing new here, but I was still amazed every time I see the statistic that since 2000, 50% of the Fortune 500 companies have ceased to exist. Now, you think that, I work with giant players and they're sometimes a little scared to innovate because while they're making money, they pay the shareholders, no one wants to sort of rock the boat. But if you look at that, you realize these big companies are really under threat. They have to adapt faster. So innovation isn't a nice to have, it's an absolute imperative at the moment. So I'm going to talk about what we mean by innovation. Simplistically, there's really two sorts. There's doing this really operational excellence where you look at what you already have and make it better, through to more radical innovation. So you often see them referred to as this core innovation. I call that the keep the lights on innovation. So that's taking your existing products and services and working on making them a bit better. Then if you look outside your own organization, you look through to the world, and there's what we call adjacent innovation. So these are things that might be new to our company that other people in the world are doing. Could be our competitors, but I'm also encouraging my clients to look at different industries because you see ideas emerging. If you can take those, you can repurpose them in your own industry. So it's about keeping up with others, but also keep going, right? Keep improving. Then the third sort is this transformational. This is doing something really new, very, very different. And this is the sort of shoot for the stars innovation. Now, when you take this, there's not one better than the other. We tend to want to do a bit of a blend, and you'll see companies doing things like, 70% on core, 20% on the sort of adjacent, and 10% on transformational. But if you're not doing a mix, you'll find your company stagnates. So we're really trying to get this disruption into companies before they get fully disrupted themselves. So the challenges, when we hear about disruption, I'm going to stop for a moment and ask you, what are the challenges with disruption, innovation in your organization? So wherever you are, sometimes you might be a consultant going into companies, maybe you're at a traditional company, or maybe a really fast scale up. But let's just hear from you. What are your biggest challenges, the things that prevent innovation? Put those into your chat, and Anna, if you can pass them on to us. I'll give you a minute just to think through innovation. I can see Tao looking. I bet you have quite a few challenges, and we'll hear from you in a moment.
I have tons.
Okay. Yeah, so business as usual. We hear that quite often, that there's so much existing work. It's really hard to get the space or the time to innovate. That's a big one. What else do we have? So I'm in Europe at the moment, and governance is a big one. So there's a fear of our existing systems. What do they allow us to do or not allow us to do? I remember many years ago when I was at Yahoo in America, and there was always an ongoing joke that if you didn't do something in the first 3 months when you didn't know what you weren't allowed to do, then that would, you'd never be able to innovate. And it's true. We probably got the best ideas when people first joined the company before they knew what they weren't allowed to do. People don't know how to innovate. Okay. Yeah, I think people aren't sure. They're so used to doing things in a certain way. It's hard to understand why innovation changes. Legacy systems, that's huge. That's probably the thing I spend more time on nowadays, going into organizations. And when you actually get them to say, what's preventing innovation, rather than let's just have another hackathon, what's actually preventing innovation from existing? It's the existing system. So everything from the way we fund our projects, our governance, our contracts, okay, how to prioritize. Yeah, I think people don't know how do we want to innovate. Maybe you want transformational, but all the old stuff always gets put first. Political games. Actually, many years ago, Tom and Mary Poppendick, who wrote the Lean software series, we were talking about what was the root cause of a lot of these problems in organizations and being able to change. And really, each time it came down to incentives drive behavior. So that's another area which I work even with HR and going through and saying, okay, what are these incentives that people are getting paid out for? How do they get people to incentivize to do the right thing or the wrong thing? Political games, if people have incentives and grading, that all creates it. Time, resistance to change, skills and culture gap, fair to decentralize and trust, lack of communication, administration again, and fear. Yeah, so there's this, it's not easy, right? We're not going into this saying, oh, we'll just have a hackathon, run a design sprint, and we're all good to go. And the last one, fixed budget. Okay. So all of us probably relate to this. We're all in the same world. I'm going to boil that down to a few areas where we are going to look at today. So one is that I think in Reaction, in the early days, I'm an early Agilist, probably the late 90s, I started with extreme programming and lean and things. And there was this idea I remember being pulled into organizations where they said, we want Agile. And I said, why do you want Agile? And they said, we want more features faster, right? Do you remember those days? So what then begins to happen is we bring in things like Agile, and it's brilliant. We get teams going. And it's not that we can't build the right thing. It's just we've got this big focus on build it right, build it fast. So people put a lot of stress in there. However, if you're not building the right thing, we can just be simply building better, faster horses or building the wrong thing righter, right? That's not what we're after. So now you saw a shift where people said, okay, well, we can't just keep sort of spinning, building, and maybe doing some core innovation. We want to build the right thing. So how do we know what are the right ideas? And this idea of building the outcomes over the outputs. So this is where you'd see design sprint, design thinking, lean startup, all of that coming in. And this is brilliant. But as we just heard in the challenges, if you don't change your environment and your culture, then this is where all good ideas go. They go to the idea graveyard, right? So they never see the light of day. And I see this, we're really good at coming up with ideas, but they don't actually get through that sort of corporate factory, the sausage machine, to get out to our customers. So this is what the problem we were trying to solve with Mobius. It was about creating this balance, this idea of we want to really balance up building the right thing, building it right. And if you think of this like a race car track, it's all about improving this whole system as we go round. Now I'm going to take this. I stole this from one of our Mobius coaches, Paul Brown. And I always put it up front because, this idea that all models are wrong, but some are useful. And I think that's really pertinent. There is no silver bullet. I think we should all go into it going, there's a lot of useful things in all of these frameworks out there. There's a lot on the market. But, there's no perfect way. Instead, we need to find the best way for ourselves and our context. So some of the things that make these useful are they're agnostic of the underlying framework, right? So we should really take these different ideas. I'm a big fan of blending them. I was kind of seeing all the methodology wars, when customers say, oh, should we use Scrum? Should we use Kanban? Now it's, should we use SAFe? No, SAFe's terrible. Oh, should we use Scrum at scale? This every day, there's another kind of war being fought on LinkedIn. And I think, well, hang on, they all have some value. We need different tools for different jobs. And so why don't we blend these in a way? So that's what we're trying to do with Mobius. They also help you ask the right questions at the right time. So to get people started, we like this idea of sort of guide rails, a sort of safety harness to help you, guide you, but let you have the flexibility to change. So I'll just take you around the navigator, the Mobius navigator, and the simple steps. So we always ask the question, you know, if nothing else, we say, why are we doing this? And who are we doing it for? Why does this matter? Then we need to get real data, get out of the business, get out of the building and understand motivations. Out of this, we create the measurable outcomes. Now, probably a lot of you are using things like OKRs, objective key results, or other outcome approaches. What I find at the moment is they're often imposed, they're still very output focused, and it's because we haven't done enough understanding to get there. And we're doing this rapidly, but you do need to make sure you really understand the problem before we dive into solution mode. Then we generate ideas, right? We're pretty good at doing that, but now we need to map out what's the best way to reach the outcomes. I'm a big fan of saying, what's the simplest thing we can do? Might be a little bit of research, could be running an experiment, or maybe it's sort of a no-brainer. We can get that straight out to our customers. And this is where we decide. And we're always looking at, don't just come up with a million ideas in your product backlogs. Actually say, which of these ideas do you think is going to make the most impact on the outcomes we've chosen to look at? And again, we don't really know if they're the right thing. So this is where we want to validate quickly. And this is where you're going to see your sort of Scrum, Kanban, whatever approaches you're using, Lean Startup. And so we want to get these ideas out quickly and then measure the impact. It's really important to make this visual. We're using these models at all levels of the organization. And this is where we can create alignment. It's around the outcomes, not showing people, you know, 2,000 items on a backlog, but saying, here are the things that we're tracking towards to see if we're going to hit the outcomes or not. Then we always want to learn and reflect and then adapt. This is our sort of decision point. A lot of companies have very sort of old portfolios where they've kept a lot of products on. So we're trying to go through and get rid of things, saying these things aren't creating as much value as something else. So this is this idea of, do we keep doing it? Do we pivot or persevere? And you can tailor them. I'm big on this sort of idea of a common visual language, something very simple for people to get started. You want to kind of bury the complexity. I was always a big fan of when the original Apple iPod came out. You know, as soon as I saw that it had about 40% of the features of other MP3 players, I thought, that's really interesting. And what they did, which I loved, is they had a very simple interface, but any complexity was sort of buried. You could get to it for power users, but you don't display it all at once. So I think for getting people to adopt ways of working and create this common language, we want to make it simple. So this is obviously in the before times. This was in March last year in Japan. And obviously everybody's really happy working this way. I think we were, right? I can't wait to get back to that. But everybody can collaborate when it's visual and it's simple. You've got something to look at, share ideas, and that's how, as humans, we work better. So the way we do this is we're using that language to create a common flow and visibility, and we're using it for our strategy, building our organizational culture, through to our products and services, and our platforms and operations. And the way we're aligning is using these outcomes. So anything we do at one level, you can see it should have an impact on the other level. And it's this rapid learning as we go round that helps the organization improve. So we're using this for everything from life hacking. This was a friend who was a software director, and he came across Mobius and went, oh, that's really interesting. I'm kind of deciding what to do in my career. So he actually laid this out using the Mobius maps, and he's been running this for years to keep deciding what does he do next in his life, right? So a very fluid model for life hacking. This, again, very simplistic views. I used to show people the big picture. We are actually going to go and do a deeper dive with Tao. But when you first start, keep it kind of simple, right? This is like the ultimate Kanban board. You've got this flow going across all the way from discovery, options, through to delivery, right? So you should see that nice flow. So at any time when you're building something and you're on the right-hand side, you're saying, okay, we could do this new feature, but how does it improve the outcomes and solve that problem for these people over there? So it's that idea that you can keep this continuity that I think helps people understand and keep focusing on the outcomes. And this is a really different use case. This is social impact. So outcome-driven social impact. And this is Kuber Shirazi has a organization called Peace Through Prosperity. And the idea is that people get radicalized and taken into terrorism in these countries such as Pakistan and Yemen because they don't have the money to make better choices. So for example, their children go to the free school, but get highly radicalized. So he's been using Mobius, Agile, and Lean to go into these small micro entrepreneurs. So people selling fruit on the side of the road and radically change their world. And, you know, we see this model. If you keep it simple enough, I think it's nice that all of these different organizations, be you know, aerospace, banks, what have you, it's a way that you can connect people. I love this idea of connection, right? We connect all our different tools, our frameworks together, and people can use it for a wide variety of purposes. So that's the quick view of Mobius. Now I'm going to get to the fun part because it's always better to hear the real life stories. So we're going to go across to Tao, and Tao, I'm going to, well, I suppose I can just I'll stop sharing for a little bit. You can give us the background, then I'll take you over to the mural board. How about that?
Perfect. Thanks so much, Gabrielle, and hello, everyone. We're absolutely delighted to be here joining you. It would have been great if it was in person, but hopefully next year we'll be with you. I'm head of digital innovation and fintech at a challenger bank, and I was hired to be a disruptor within my very regulated industry and bank. And it was mainly about identifying and solving the big issues that will impact the future of banking. So I love the challenge. And just to give you all some context, when I arrived, it was very much a lot of the questions and thoughts that you shared in the chat with Gabrielle earlier on. So we had a very, very old legacy culture. Our brand is probably over 150 years old. So you can imagine the legacy culture, the legacy technology we're living with. I was bombarded with information overload, fantastic information. So loads of blueprints all over the floors, the building, tons of detail around our customers, our segmentation. I was overwhelmed by the number of processes that we had, but also the inconsistent way of doing things. And then culturally, we had tons of silos and pockets of Agile. Then we were doing Kanban. We had management consultants. So it was messy. And I just thought, wow, we have tons of problems. Where do I start? But, you know, at the same time, we were still positive. We're a great, happy bunch of people. But I was still thinking, where on earth do I start? And just to share with you, my journey, I realized very quickly it wasn't going to be easy. I was going to have resistance. I was going to have non-believers and colleagues wanting to stick to what I call the old ways of doing things, because whenever we're faced with change, we always default to what we know. And sometimes it tends to be the old way of doing things. And what I realized was language was key. So I needed a common language to just unite everyone, and a common language that would bring us all on a journey where my colleagues could still use the tools that they felt very comfortable with because we had so many of them, but the common language that would energize us at the same time, that would be repeatable and scalable. And I was looking for a glue, the holy grail of the glue that could join us all together and do all these great things, but also disrupt us. And that's how I found Mobius, because I was looking for something agile, something that would be flexible, something that was modern, relative, that I could literally walk around with one page. So none of the information overload, but just the ability to unite us all, that very quickly we could get together, we could form groups, we could just pick up where we were. And Mobius just ticked all the boxes for me on this amazing common language. And then I was faced with amongst all of these challenges, me of having landed on a common language tool was we were being disrupted at the same time. So they were fintechs, it was COVID, people needed access to finance, as you can imagine. And currently with one of our loans products, we were taking too long to actually say yes to the customer. So to actually turn this loan around, and probably I'd say 40% of our loans were being sent to the contact center. And for me, when I look at loans, it should be a yes or a no, and there should be very few maybes. But we were having quite a lot of maybes and way too many maybes than yes or no. And our EXCO members, they came to innovation, which is what I wanted them to do. And they said, how can innovation help us? We're stuck. And I had two choices. I could either say, well, hang on, I'm new, I need to get things done, I need to add in more processes and documentation and figure out the innovation strategy, or I could just jump in and we could just all work together with our common language and a great toolkit of Mobius. So I reached out to Gabrielle, and we were super ambitious as well. So I was riding on this energy. We had our first workshop. We had a cross-functional team together, which was amazing. So I had people from our research strategy team. We had some marketing folks. We had some data analytics people. We had our risk guys, our credit team, and we had some senior EXCO members at the same time, because this is how we solve a problem together with diversity of thinking. And in my enthusiasm and excitement and just saying, well, we've got to do things differently, I just said to Gabrielle, well, we've got 4 hours. And in these 4 hours, we need to help solve this problem of getting loans through, because our customers are suffering. And I thought, well, we're going to, because culture is a big challenge, and we needed to start changing the culture. But I thought,
Tao, I'm going to jump in and just remind you, it was meant to be 4 hours, but you couldn't get the people for 4 hours. So it turned out to be 3 hours. I'm also going to just reiterate, when Tao made that point about who was coming along, when you first kick off, I'm a big fan. You know how we talk about cross-functional teams, and you got to go beyond that now. I think we really have to think about cross-organizational teams. So these EXO sort of teams, you get everybody, because if you want to make change happen, people either, you know that old saying, keep your friends close and enemies closer. You've got to get these sort of change makers in different areas. So I think that was brilliant. You just happened to invite these people because Tao's very social. So I think she just sort of went, oh, I like these people. They're interesting. They have some good points of view. So I think that worked really well.
Yes, and it was breaking down barriers, Gabrielle, because as you're saying that, I just realized usually people weren't invited, people were excluded in our culture because of the silos. So for the first time, I was welcoming people, and I said, come along, because we're sharing the language, we're sharing a different way of doing things. And you know, I forgot about the 4 hours to 3. That was brilliant. And you know what? We weren't fluffy. We were straight to, let's get to the heart of the problem. And we just kicked this off. And I didn't know where we were going to go, but I was positive, and I knew if we were focused together, we would get there. And we definitely got there.
Yeah, and I'm going to show you. Let me share the screen. So, and just to put that in perspective, I love being hands-on. I mean, I really love what I do. And probably one of the more fun things is to really go into depth, understand real problems. Like I love solving real problems. I think people can get quite theoretical with training and things, but I think you need to go in and see what people are dealing with. So as a coach, imagine you get thrown in the deep end. I'm just going to show my screen. We're using Miro, you know, whatever you want to use, I'm agnostic. And you'll see I've got these kind of simple maps up there. Now, as a coach, you know, imagine you get thrown in the deep end where you're told not to even have 4 hours, to have 3. You're going to get all these kind of change makers, quite senior people in an organization. You have to take a subject which you may not know much about, right? I wasn't up on the latest regulations with finance and things, and told, okay, you have 3 hours to try to figure out this problem with all these people who don't even work together much. So they're a disparate group. And by the end of 3 hours, have something tangible that we can take forward. So that's a big challenge. I was up for it because it sounded fun, and I'm an optimist, and Tao's so enthusiastic. She has that infectious enthusiasm. So I said, sure, let's try it. So we get in there, and of course, you know what it's like with especially senior people, everyone's talking at the same time. So what I did, it was nice having this sort of guardrails where you can see you've got these areas to put information into, right? With little questions. So I just went for it. I didn't know how this was going to work, but I thought, let's give it a go. So what we did is we jumped in and we said, okay, why are we doing this? So Tao can probably talk through this better, but you can see here, it was about banking models being disrupted.
Yeah, and we were being challenged by non-banks, so to speak, and other new regulation coming in, and fintechs coming in. So we were worried, and there's a new young brand as well challenging us at the same time, and customers wanting money due to COVID. So there was a lot hitting us. And originally we were thinking, well, we started the workshop actually knowing parts of this, but actually saying, well, hang on, because we always jump to solution. And my colleagues were, let's use this new technology and regulation together called open banking, and let's do that. But it was great when Gabrielle brought us back and said, okay, so why are we doing this? And we started unpacking who we're doing this for, and who are our competitors, but actually what is our real fundamental problem? And that was really great, because it zoned in for me. I knew some of the challenges we had, but I didn't realize that one of our main competitors was actually getting in with kids and their brand at age 10. So they were developing this relationship, they called the credit unions, with our customers at age 10. And we were only developing this relationship with potential customers when they needed access to money. So that was a big wake-up call for me, that we were looking at this literally completely
and that was
wrong.
Interesting, because they had an aging population, so this became important. I like that we looked at the sort of new to bank customers, so you can see the sort of breakdown where you take this information, you keep driving into why is this happening. Obviously you spin off and do a lot more digging into, what's this really costing, what's the impact. But out of this, and I won't spend too much time, I don't want to take up the whole talk because we've got Riccardo's story, but it was really about how do we get people's jobs done fast, to get them the finance fast, make it an easier way to do this. And even while we're doing the research, I'm big on actionable research. It turned out that by simply looking at what competitors were doing, Tao said, oh, they don't even ask for as much information as we do. And considering they were the big players, we went, oh, without even building anything, if we just actually cut some of these requests out, we can help people get through this funnel much faster. And then out of this, because we again, in a 3-hour workshop, we wanted something to go forward with. We wanted to sort of say, how would we quickly test the desirability? If we come up with this idea to replace and make it easier to use this open banking protocol to share and use customer data from other banks, could we build something quickly? And how would we test that people would really be able to use this? Would it sort of solve their problems financially? And can we build and support it? And out of this, Tao sort of went, well, actually, there is a way. If we look at our partners who want to have these amazing sort of third-party platforms, could we actually get them to create a prototype? That way we can both test it, see if they're any good, and take that forward. So that was what we ended up with. You can see it gets a bit thin on the delivery. We actually had action items, which were all around actually going after this sort of prototype idea quickly. But this was a good amount to get done in 3 hours, wasn't it?
Yes,
I remember
it was
Rob saying that, one of the excos, sorry, Tao, at the end, he said, yeah, this is amazing. He said, after 6 months of expensive consultants being in here, we got more done in a 3-hour workshop just by talking to each other.
Yeah, no, spot on. And yeah, I mean, look, when we started it, I didn't even know how we were going to end up. but it was amazing because from that energy and from the outputs that we got out, I used that energy to keep going. So this is where the culture comes in, to start changing the culture. And we immediately started actioning this and prioritizing. And we got together a project team and we delivered, we went to market. It took us 20 weeks. Never been heard of before in my organization, and I'm trying to get us down to 16. And yeah, you'll hear from Riccardo. His weeks are completely different, but I was chuffed with 20 weeks, considering we've never done anything in under 6 months or 9 months. So 20 weeks was huge, and it was a game changer because we embraced totally new technology. So we leaned out on partners. We went into the cloud for the first time. And as you can imagine, a regulated industry where we're so risk averse, to try out something, God forbid, in the cloud was huge. And I pushed my colleagues into the cloud, and we just tried it out because this was something safe to do, because we could always roll it back if it didn't work. But it was a bigger change and a mindset change for my colleagues. And we knew this was the best thing and the right thing for the customer. So we actually saw an immediate uplift when we went live of about 3%. So what that meant was, in over 3 months of having gone live, we saw about 1.6 million worth of loans getting approved. So before, where we had like about 40% going to that maybe section, that was probably come right down to about 5%. And to have 1.5 million being turned around in 3 months was just phenomenal for us. And as you can imagine, I just kept getting that team so excited. So we changed mindset. We put out a positive message. We got people working out of their comfort zones, and our project team actually stuck as a project team. So we were making decisions together. We were unblocking things together as a united team. So everybody had a stake. It wasn't me as head of innovation and fintech, somebody else as head of risk. We forgot our titles. We were just the team who was going to get this out to make an impact to our customers. And, you know, there were a lot of wobblies. It wasn't smooth sailing. So we had to be brave. I freaked out a lot of my technology colleagues because the different implementation options were just pivoting from a SaaS solution to a platform as a service to God forbid, going onto AWS. But we made it happen. And I'm delighted to say that in 3 weeks' time, I'm attending a banking award ceremony in the UK where we actually shortlisted. This is one of 2 projects we actually shortlisted on, where we use Mobius. So that's my story.
That's great. And just take that nugget. When Tao says that 1.5 million for 3 months, this is something that might take the bank 2 years to do. They get that out in 6 months. So you can do the math. And that's when you want to make real change. What the senior people listen to is saying, hey, we got this out. We already made 1.5 million, right? We're going to make X, 20 million by doing this a lot sooner. So that's a bigger change maker than anything else we could say. Thank you, Taylor. It was brilliant. I'm going to go over to Riccardo now with yet a very different story about pivoting in a pandemic with Riccardo's amazing Italian restaurant in London. And you're on mute at the moment, Riccardo. He's like, yeah, I know, I'm looking, why is that not unmuting?
I'm just using an external screen, so I was trying to find the bloody button. How are you? That was great. Thanks, Tao and Gabrielle. Really nice to be here, and great that we're able to share screens, hopefully. And I think Gabrielle's disappeared. My name is Riccardo Mariti. I have a restaurant in London. And I'm going to just start sharing screen. I haven't got long, so I'm just start flying through a little bit. No, sorry.
Sorry, we did take up a bit of time, didn't we?
No, don't worry. I think I've got 10 minutes, so we'll give a bit of chance for. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
We can. Just go to present mode and you're good to go.
Yeah, good. Okay. Here we are. There you go. I have a restaurant in London. We've been running the restaurant since late 2016, early 2017, using Scrum and Agile methodologies without management. really focusing on sort of developing this Daniel Pink thing of autonomy, mastery, and purpose throughout the whole organization for our teams. And I was thinking about really that Gabrielle put the title up, pivoting in a pandemic. I thought it was really relevant to all of us right now to think about how many times we have to pivot our organizations. I've had to pivot my restaurant, well, more than half a dozen times, so more than 6 times in the last 2 years. We just haven't known where we were going. And it really, the ability to be able to do that all came down to the initial training that happened when we were implementing Scrum in the early days. So, we started end of 2016, beginning of 2017. By 2020, we had 2 years of doubling profitability within the company. We had customer satisfaction scores had gone from late 70s to late 90s consistently over a period of time. And we were in a position where we even made, traditionally, we'd always lost money in January and February at the beginning of the year because they're quiet months for a restaurant. And in 2020, we actually made a profit. So things were going incredibly well. And it looked like we were going to carry on doing brilliantly, even though the sounds of the pandemic started coming in. We weren't quite sure. Our government in the UK were all up for getting herd immunity and keeping everybody open. And then literally within 1 day of notice, I think by lunchtime one day, Boris Johnson's government said, okay, we're closing tonight at midnight. And it was pretty shocking for everybody. And I think the ability to be able to, the fact that we had created autonomous teams within our organization and we were already extremely agile, allowed us to have the right mindset to be able to adapt fast. It was a good question earlier on from Jean-Baptiste, I think it was, Francois Tondreau, why make a huge leap of faith when you have a working recipe? Well, interestingly, that was one of the things that we were looking at a lot is, how to innovate. When you start an organization, by nature of being a startup, you're already innovating all the time. But as soon as you start to put standard operating procedures in place, and you put a police force in place to make sure that the standard operating procedures take place, you've just killed the organization's ability to be able to innovate. And so we struggled with that for a long time. And we down here on the far right-hand side, there was a lot more to this, but we always tried to stay in that sort of center part of the loop where, interestingly, we were working with the loops, or I was, before I'd ever met Gabrielle. And when I saw her loops, I was like, oh my God, Mobius loops, that's brilliant. And it was really intuitive. I think she says that I used to do a lot of the work that she does just intuitively. Over the years, you tend to sort of pick up ways of working. But what I found amazing with Gabrielle's system was the fact that she actually had a checklist. I said to her yesterday, how many times have you done something that's really successful, and then you never do it again because you forget about it? And the thing I really like about going around the loop, and I think there's a picture we're using here, is you've got this constant reminder all the time where you could stay on the right-hand side where you're actually doing the work, or you can decide to go over into the left-hand side and say, hey, do we need to disrupt something? Does something need to change? And I think there's that thing of who's doing the disruption here? And where does the improvement come from? Because a lot of the disruption we did in the early days when we were implementing Scrum, yes, we had to do it, but it wasn't urgent. I could just see along the horizon we were going to go out of business because our wages were very high, and we were just sort of very stagnant. So we forced a lot of disruption with the new organization, and that built this kind of muscle, not just with me, but with the team members. I think in some of the comments earlier on, the participants were mentioning quite a few times this thing about having a common language. And we're finding that a lot, is that the more we're able to talk about disruption, about improvement, about autonomous teams, and get out of that situation where people expect there to be a supreme architect who comes up with all the ideas and then just goes and gives orders, which is, traditionally in the restaurant business, you see that all the time. We're extremely hierarchical in traditional restaurants. My restaurant, we have a flat organization. We've had no management since 2017. So just to run through this, they had a lot of training, my team, just really on keeping the lights on. As we said, it was incremental innovation that we were applying on a day-by-day basis. Teams are really geared up for that. And then what happens, you suddenly get this disruption that gets thrown upon you. So one day we're in business, the next day we're not. We're told to lock down. The supermarkets were empty, and we were absolutely determined to keep the lights on, keep moving. I've always known that closing the restaurant is never a good idea. So we had to find a solution to stay open. And it was interesting because this was a time when I just met Gabrielle properly. She was introduced by a good friend of ours, Joe Justice, and we were chatting a lot on the telephone. And so Gabrielle would be coming on my Zoom calls with my team and see a live feed at the restaurant as all of this was going on. And we were able to pivot the organization. Literally by the time dinner had finished on the night we were due to lock down, we already turned it into a deli with very little notice. And, we went out and did a bit of guerrilla research. We went out to all the different local shops, created our own products, learned how to do sourdough bread because our bakers weren't delivering anymore. And day one of lockdown, we had a full deli, no longer a restaurant. And really, it was the ability to be able to do that came from this sort of autonomy from the teams, learning how to organize themselves. They've always been organizing their own rotas, their holidays, when they work, when they don't. Nobody tells them when to work. And I think that just being able to give the team a problem and the team coming up with solution. This is a picture of the restaurant. We took all the tables out. We said, this is an operations, room now. And we just had cases and cases and cases of wine, beer, even toilet roll, all the immediate things that people were really worried about running out of. We had those. We were repurposing lots of DHL boxes because we couldn't find packing boxes, and we found
just a moment on that, Riccardo. It was so funny. I was on the Zoom call and I went, "Why are those boxes behind you?" And he went, "Oh yes, well, I was taking my dog for a walk and I went past and I saw this place was closing down and they were getting rid of all these DHL boxes. So I got them so I could repurpose them for takeaway." And I just love that thinking. Like, Riccardo's the most agile person I know. Like, he just sort of lives and breathes it. I get so inspired because he just takes anything and makes it work. No, go back to your slides, Riccardo. I was into it. Don't stop sharing.
No, it's
I just wanted to say that was very
nice
cool.
to see a human face. Let me make sure I'm getting the right screen. Hold on. Is it that one? Can you see?
And that's craft shop, right? Because everything again was closed. You had to make everything.
Yeah.
So all those signs you couldn't order. And this team, they were just phenomenal. Everyone just pitches in and does everything because they're so used to it.
Can you see the slide?
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So we turned that into a operations room. Hold on, let me see if I can get the slides going out. Yeah, part of the mastery was that for about a year, 2 years, we used to have this great thing that we call red tagging. There was something I read in the from the military, which is 2 is 1 and 1 is none, and it means if you've only got one of something, you pretty much haven't got it, because at some point everything fails. And so we're always trying to develop contingency plans. So this was our pizza oven. So we said, okay, what happens, right? They're out of order until 3 p.m. We did that on a busy Sunday lunch. And we always pick busy times to do this, or sometimes just take a key team member and say, right, you're joining me for lunch, and just pull them out right in the middle of a busy service and just see what happens and see how people adapt. Because, once we had a team member stabbed himself through the hand in the middle of the service with a knife. The knife went right the way through, and you can imagine with that much blood, the guy was bleeding to death, and we had to get him to hospital. So we lost 3 team members, one to hold the tourniquet, one to drive the car, the other one to translate for him. And we lost them for the whole night, because we had to leave somebody in the hospital with him. In fact, that was me, but so you do lose team members right out of the blue. So how do you train that stress when there is no stress and create stress? I love creating stress in training environments for team members when they know it's safe, and teaching people that it's good to make small experiments. Let's just try this. Let's just see if this will work, and so on, and really getting that into the psyche of the individuals. We quickly wrote to the neighbors, said, hey, we're here, and we put, I can't remember how many, but several thousand of these through. We emailed everyone. We did it on social media. We did a couple of Facebook Lives with Pash, who's been with me for 25 years now. Just let people know that we were there. We'd help them with anything they needed. And we local
actually
hospital.
go back for 1 second, Riccardo. I think this is really important. When I spoke to Riccardo, if you look at that note, what's really interesting is home delivery. Okay, shopping, because they were offering that they would help people shop, a lift to the doctor's station, emergency repairs. And I said, well, you're doing all this. And he said, well, what we do, the purpose is to, help people, help the community. So that is a driving purpose. So I just want to pick up on that. That's really important.
Yeah. And not just the community, but also the hidden community, the people that we never really heard about who suffered greatly during lockdown, which were our suppliers. So even if we didn't make a big profit, if we could keep our suppliers in business, that was going to be great for us, because then we have the infrastructure when we get back. We had maintenance people, they were just sitting at home on furlough saying, hey, we'll volunteer to do some stuff if you want us to, so I think that was a bit of fun. Local hospital came in, said, could we support them? So we did that for a local charity, and that just kept us really busy. This is one of our neighbors and a regular customer, and he'd come in and help us serve the hospitals. And we were doing somewhere between 200 and 500 meals a day for the hospitals, getting great feedback. But literally overnight, oh, you can open as a restaurant, but you can only open outside. Oh, you can open inside. The government in England, I don't know about other parts of Europe, but they were literally changing the rules almost every day. And, getting feedback from customers, what are they happy with? What do they consider safe? Should our waiters even know when the government say they don't have to wear masks? Do you feel more comfortable with our teams wearing masks, etc.? And it's getting that direct feedback, but making it super visible to everybody, including customers. One of I was teaching, I think we're coming to a close now. We were teaching with Gabrielle, and I was very lucky that they used the restaurant as a case study, and we would talk about this disruptive loop. And the question was, if you couldn't use the restaurant as a restaurant, what could you do? I've got a personal guarantee on the rent. I've got to pay the rent. We've got to pay a whole bunch of bills just to, keep alive. We need a certain amount of money. And he came up with an idea as well. How about if we turned the restaurant into an agile training center? I'm keen on agility. I've got a lot of friends who are, and it seems that we've had all sorts of people come to the restaurant. So from 3M, BP, Tesla, Bank of Europe, European Bank of Reconstruction Development. We've been invited to Harvard to talk to them. So the idea was, you've got all these big companies that are really interested in being agile, but somehow they understand the restaurant model much better. So I think sometimes it's easier to look at something that's external to your own situation to get the basics. So how about we turn a restaurant into a Scrum training school? And so I said my homework for the night was to contact 10 people, random people that I don't know, from LinkedIn and so on, and see if I could get anybody interested. And this thing that Gabrielle was saying about this radical innovation, just forcing your brain to ask stupid questions that seem irrelevant or just out of the ordinary. And we got one guy came back in. He's got businesses in New York and Florida, and he's really interested in doing that, not only with us in the UK, but in America as well. And so I think we're going to be able to travel to US sometime in November. And so maybe November, December, we'll go out there and have a chat and so on. But it was very good fun. I think a lot of this stuff is, even when you're in a really tight situation and things are tough, I think that the excitement is in having fun with a team, giving team autonomy, giving people a voice in making decisions. I think that's really been the biggest learning for us on how we can survive. Oh, we got some questions here. We're going to innovation training using restaurant next year. Stay posted. Cool.
All right.
I don't know how Q&A works on this here.
I think they're going to post the Q&A into the chat. I asked Anna to start collecting it. So that was I always love seeing the story, Riccardo. It's just amazing. And I posted one back where we talked about the flood that happened a couple of weeks ago. And anybody else, the restaurant's flooded, and Riccardo, of course, is down there in his rain boots and mopping it out. But then he says, yeah, oh, well, maybe we should do this every month or a couple of months so that we can learn.
Yeah,
okay.
And I think you came up with a great idea, is having everything on wheels and having a mobile restaurant. So all of the kitchen equipment, you start to put it into awkward flows and then get people to come in and do training. And they actually have the ability to be able to modify the equipment and the equipment flow, and maybe even, set up a pop-up business so that they could even make some money at the end of the training.
And I think we might do that in Miami. Will be the first one by March next year, because I think that's about the earliest we'll be able to fully get that with Curtis, another co-conspirator. So that might be our first kickoff one. But it's I find with especially executives, they don't want the mechanical. They want something that makes them think. And I think people need inspiration. So I'm a big fan of this very different way of training. I think we've been modifying our training over time and trying the few experiments. Oh, that's good. Anna, she said 30 minutes delay. And I was thinking, well, that's a long time to wait. Now it's 30 seconds. All right. So we should be getting some questions any second. I'm excited. Hopefully.
Yeah. And anyway, that was fun. It was great fun to be here. It would be nice to actually be able to see some people.
Oh, I know. That's the thing. I miss where you can actually have live people, even on video. It's weird as a presenter, isn't it? We were just saying at the beginning of this, the three of us agreed we'd keep our videos on because you need someone you can look at. I find if I don't, it becomes so dry. But what's next for the restaurant then? What's happening this week? Just tell us a bit more about what your week looks like and any experiments you're running at the moment while we wait for those.
Well, I think one of the great experiments is training everybody to be a product owner now, and not just that, but also we've really been working a lot. I was doing some training with Joe Justice the other day, and he was talking about personas, and we start looking at of course, product backlog items have completely different values depending on who you're talking to. So something that might be incredibly valuable to a team member might not be valuable at all to a customer. So it's really that thing about who do you prioritize to keep happy? Because of course, if you haven't got good motivated team members, you're not going to be able to serve any customers. And I think the more, I've noticed so many people in all walks of life with this almost almost like PTSD. You know, this is post-traumatic stress disorder coming through from the uncertainty that's being created through this COVID crisis. And so it's kind of like the responsibility of a product owner to come in and create manageable, doable backlog that's not overstretching, because people just don't have the same capability that they did before all of this happened. Is my experience with the team. So we're sort of in a respectful way, I mean, dumbing down the backlog to a point where it becomes fun to come to work, because you're able to do the stuff and you're ticking stuff off a list and keeping it simple. So I think that's what we're really working on. Can we have some more examples of disrupting flow in your restaurant? Yeah, I mean, going. Well, I think that the whole thing, day one, I saw that. I read that book, Team of Teams, by Stanley McChrystal, General McChrystal, and I realized that in the early days when we were doing a startup, we were like that team of teams, and I wanted to get back to that. And I spent quite a lot of time with Jeff Sutherland. I went to Tesla, I went to Bosch, I went to all these places, and I'm seeing these teams that are working together autonomously. Their teams they didn't have managers in the same way that we had managers. You know, our managers were like little dictators. They were just telling people what to do. So I tried to share this vision with the team. And my head chef and manager handed in their notice and decided to leave. They didn't want to give up any power. So it was a real magical moment when I said to the team, hey, do you want to have a go at running the restaurant on your own, or do you want more management? You know, it's your choice. If we're going to be agile here, we're going to be, you know, you can help be part of the decision. And unanimously, they said they wanted to have a go at running it themselves. And then when you give them the freedom, that's when the deep issues really do come up. After the initial euphoria, that was something that Henrik Nyberg said to me. He said, after the initial euphoria of, you know, allowing people the freedom, the deep issues come up, and they really did come up. It was tough for everyone. And so it's been a very interesting time. But now, you know, we have a self-managing restaurant. Yeah, main blockers you encountered, Riccardo. The main blocker I had was in my own head, was when I would read something and I would be having this conversation is, what are my team going to say when I go and I present that? It sounds so radical, or, you know, those type of things. So I think that now I take much more of an educational thing of if I learn something, I think it's useful, I try to teach the same thing to the team and see what their insights are, rather than tell them my insights, you know. So instead of, I think creating I tried to push Agile onto the team, which is the complete opposite, because it's meant to be a pull system. And so it was probably necessary at one point. Sorry, Gabrielle, what you were going to say?
No, I agree. And I was just thinking when you mentioned that, I thought, yeah, that I remember in the early days trying to impose sort of when people should have their sort of scale meetings, or this is the best idea, but it doesn't quite work. But I think give people the problems. That's what I've learned over the years. That's why I always start with why. Because if people get the problem to solve, they take that to run with it. Whereas if you, what happens, I found is, especially with, you know, a lot of product owners and things, it was this idea, they come up with the ideas and the problems, they do all the investigation and throw it over the fence almost, even though you're working closely, there's still that fragmentation. That's why I look at it like a roller coaster where everybody's in it together. Because if you're not on the problem solving journey, you will not understand it. So that idea of research is too important to leave to the researchers. Really passionate about, get everybody, like Tao's session, that was everybody. I've seen you do it all the time. You turn to your team. I bet you don't even think about it, but you turn around and you're like, yeah, but why? What's the problem? You know, you always couch it as kind of a challenge, a problem for them to think about. You don't tell them what to do.
They've got to close the presentation in 1 minute. There are loads of questions coming in, which we'd love to answer. I mean, please reach out to us on social media. I'm good. LinkedIn's best for me. Be delighted to, you know, talk further on this. And Gabrielle, Tao and me, we're always having Zoom calls. You're always welcome to come and join us. If
And
you're
can I just finish on that one? Thank you, everybody. But how important are outcomes based on clear specific metrics? Really important. And it's not the numbers, it's the understanding they convey. So I'm going to leave you with that because that's what is important. Don't get hung up on the numbers themselves, but to have the numbers, you have to have a clear understanding. So thank you so much. Wonderful, Tao and Riccardo. Brilliant. Thanks for having us, everybody in Quebec, and have a wonderful day.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Merci à nos 3 conférenciers pour cette présentation, Tao, Gabrielle et Riccardo. Je vous rappelle que vous avez jusqu'à midi pour nous partager vos photos sur Instagram avec le mot-clic hashtag ATQ2021. Et les photos commencent à entrer là, sur Instagram. On en a quelques-unes ici. On a les articles fétiches qu'on vous a demandé de nous envoyer, les fameux écouteurs boutons. Ça, c'est rendu un classique. Le fameux whiteboard, très écologique. Le bureau qui monte et descend pour être plus confortable. Pour les hommes un peu plus ennuyants, même endormants, on a une lumière ici, luminothérapie pour nous garder réveillés. Ici, nous avons une paire de pantoufles avec, sur la photo, c'est écrit un repose-pied révolutionnaire. Je ne vois pas ce qu'il y a de révolutionnaire dans ce repose-pied, mais si ça marche pour vous, on est content. Et ici, le fameux sac de boxe. Ça, on peut penser qu'on est tanné du confinement et que derrière le sac de boxe, c'est écrit COVID pour nous défouler. Alors, vous continuez à nous envoyer vos photos, un simple selfie de vous, de votre environnement dans lequel vous vous trouvez aujourd'hui avec votre article fétiche de télétravail pourrait vous permettre de gagner 2 prix de participation d'une valeur de 100 $ chacun. On va faire le tirage sur le coup de 13 heures. À quoi ressemble votre article fétiche de télétravail? Parlant de prix, j'en aurai un autre pour vous d'une valeur de 100 $ à la SAC. Cette fois-ci, si vous participez avec nous à notre quiz interactif de 12h30, c'est très ludique. C'est très festif. Des questions sur le cinéma, des questions sur la musique, des connaissances générales. Vous allez vraiment avoir du fun à participer avec nous à ce quiz. Donc, je vais vous retrouver d'ailleurs pour ce quiz à 12h30. Mais en attendant, merci d'être ponctuel. Les conférences vont recommencer vers 9h50. Petit rappel, il vous suffit de cliquer sur l'onglet « Programmation » dans Swapcard afin d'accéder aux conférences. D'ici là, je vous souhaite une bonne pause. À tout à l'heure.